In life, we always expect danger to come from the outside, right? A stranger on the street, a phone scam, someone unknown trying to take advantage. But when my 11-year-old grandson pulled me by the arm in the middle of the party and whispered, with those frightened eyes, that I was about to be tricked, it felt like the ground vanished beneath my feet. Because the real betrayal, the one that truly wounds, is the kind that comes from where you least expect it, your own family. The celebration seemed perfect. Laughter, hugs, good food, soft music in the background, and a strange feeling deep inside me that I tried to ignore. But after what he told me, I began to watch more closely. The exchanged looks, the disguised nervousness, the folder with documents sitting on the table. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just a dinner. It was a setup. They had rehearsed every gesture, every word. And I was the only one in the script who didn't know how the story would end. It's hard to explain what it feels like when trust is broken. It's not just sadness. It's a kind of mourning. And you know what hurts the most? When it comes from within your own home, you don't want to believe it. Your mind replays everything you've done for them, every sacrifice, every loving gesture. How does it get to this point? I didn't yet know how to react. But in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep pretending nothing was happening. And that's when I began listening more carefully to what my heart had been trying to tell me for a long time. Before we continue, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to the Vintage Revenge Stories channel. We're building a community of incredible women who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. The phone rang like it did on any other day, but something about that call gave me chills. It wasn't the invitation itself, a family night after the school event, but the tone. It felt like every word had been carefully chosen, measured, and practiced. After so many years dealing with all kinds of people in the restaurant, you learn to listen to what's not being said. And in that call, there was a silence between the phrases, like someone tiptoeing through a minefield. Jessica, always sweet, used affectionate expressions. But there was too much sugar in her voice, like a dessert trying to cover up the bitterness of the main dish. It was the kind of tone that doesn't flow naturally, like when a new waiter tries to praise a dish they've never even tasted. Deep down, something told me, something's off. And when intuition speaks, I've learned to listen. Because it's like the smell of something burning in the kitchen. Ignore it and you might end up serving disaster on a plate. It wasn't suspicion without reason. It was experience. 30 years behind a restaurant counter, hearing stories from couples, families, fights, and reconciliations, taught me that when someone's being overly polite, there's often a heavy intention behind it. After I hung up, I just stood there staring into space like someone trying to rearrange the pieces on a chessboard. And as much as I wanted to believe it was all in my head, deep down, I already knew something was about to come out of the oven, and it wasn't going to be tasty. Some people think a smile means happiness. But those who've learned to read the soul through the face know a smile can also be a mask. When I arrived at the school event, the first thing I saw was Jessica's smile. Wide, bright, but soulless. It was like a pretty store window with nothing inside. And right then I knew something was wrong. Because a smile that doesn't reach the eyes, my dear, won't fool someone who's cried in silence too many times. They were perfectly in sync. Jessica making small talk, James laughing at the right moments, and the two of them seemed more connected with each other than with the grandson they were supposedly there to celebrate. And I, sitting in the crowd, clapped, smiled, felt moved. But my mind was somewhere else. My eyes were watching the school performance, but my heart was watching a different play. A carefully staged scene written without real affection. And to me that was more terrifying than any silence. And you know what hurt the most? Realizing all of that was happening on the same stage where my grandson smiled with such innocence. He was the only truth in that room. While the adults schemed behind the curtains, he just existed, pure, happy, proud to be seen. And maybe that's why I chose not to stop anything in that moment. Sometimes the hardest part isn't facing the lie. It's protecting the one part that's still real. And that night, that was my role. When a conversation starts with words like family planning and securing the future, most people lower their guard. Sounds like something good, right? Responsible, thoughtful, even loving. But I've learned over time, and through some hard falls, that these words can be like cheap perfume. Sweet at first, but sickening once you realize what they're really covering up. James spoke as if he wanted to protect me. But deep down, it felt like he was wrapping me in sweet words to mask a quiet kind of poison. They spoke calmly, smiling like they were offering me a gift. You deserve to rest. You shouldn't have to worry about bills, papers, hard decisions anymore. All said with a tone almost angelic. But my ears, trained by decades of customers trying to sweet-talk waiters into off-menu requests, knew exactly what manipulation wrapped in kindness sounded like. And with every new phrase I felt less like a guest and more like I was being gently cornered. This tactic of using euphemisms is old. It's like wrapping a trap in gift paper. The pretty words try to hide the real goal, to take away your power to choose. And there, between glasses of wine and forced smiles, I felt that their plan wasn't to help me, it was to silence me. To turn me into a background character in a story I had built with my own hands. And when someone tries to erase you gently, that's when you need to be most alert. Because the next step might be quiet, but it will be devastating. Liam had always been a sweet, curious, observant boy. But that night something about him felt different. When he took my hand and quietly led me to the bedroom, I realized it wasn't just a childish game. It was a gesture full of urgency. He closed the door carefully, like he was guarding a precious secret, and looked me in the eyes with a seriousness far too big for his 11 years. "They're going to try to make you sign papers tonight," he said, like someone carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I've seen a lot in life, betrayals, lies, manipulation, but nothing hit me like that moment. Because there, surrounded by toys and children's books, my grandson was more grown up than most adults I've known. He risked his own place in the home, the love of his parents, maybe even a scolding just to protect me. And that's when you understand that courage has nothing to do with age. Courage is feeling scared and speaking up anyway. It's doing what's right even when it feels dangerous. I stood still for a few seconds looking at him. I wanted to hug him, cry, promise everything would be okay, but I held back. He needed to know I heard him. That his secret was safe with me. And in that moment, in the quiet of that child's bedroom, everything changed. Not because the betrayal was any smaller, but because now I had the one truth that mattered most on my side. And when a truth is born from a pure heart, it has the power to change the entire course of a story. The house looked impeccable, like one of those magazine spreads that seemed too perfect to be real. Every detail carefully placed. The candles lit, the napkins perfectly folded, even the silverware looked like it had been measured with a ruler. But anyone who's worked in a kitchen knows that a set table doesn't always mean celebration. Sometimes it's just the stage for a performance. And that night I was the target, disguised as the guest of honor. Their smiles came too easily. Their laughter too light. The atmosphere too calm. There was something about it that reminded me of those nights at the restaurant when a customer would order a dish that didn't exist, just to test if I was paying attention. Everything looked beautiful on the outside, but was full of hidden intent on the inside. Jessica spoke of memories, James toasted to the future. And I knew that this future included decisions I hadn't even been invited to make. They were preparing me, like dressing up a dessert before delivering the final blow. At one point I realized even the wine glasses had been strategically placed. Wine softens words. It dulls clarity. And there, between toasts and fake memories, they were waiting for the perfect moment to hand me the papers. This wasn't a dinner. It was an ambush. And the cruelest part wasn't what they wanted me to sign, but the fact that they had planned it all as if I'd already surrendered. What they didn't know was that my story was far from over. When Jessica opened that white folder and placed the papers on the table with a gentle smile, I already knew this wasn't just about help. She used that sweet, concerned tone, the kind that's meant to disarm. It's just a power of attorney to help with the bills, nothing major. But anyone who's spent a lifetime dealing with contracts, invoices, and suppliers, like I have, knows how to tell the difference between kindness and manipulation. And what I saw there went far beyond a simple bank authorization. Among those papers were terms few people would catch at first glance. Asset management, medical decision-making, even a petition for legal guardianship. This wasn't about making my life easier. It was about muting my autonomy. They wanted to control what I spent, where I lived, who I talked to. And the cruelest part? With my own consent. Because that's how some traps work. You sign with a smile, and by the time you realize, you've lost your voice in your own story. That's when I fully grasped the scale of the performance that night. They didn't just want to help me, they wanted to neutralize me. Turn me into a passive figure. Dependent. Obedient. And all under the excuse of love and protection. As if real care came with fine print and hidden clauses. That's where so many people go wrong. They confuse control with care. But there was something inside me they didn't know yet, something that doesn't give in so easily. What many people still don't understand is that stepping back doesn't mean giving up. Sometimes the smartest move you can make is to take a breath, step away and see the board more clearly. When I realized they were convinced I would sign everything that very night, in their picture-perfect setup, I decided to do the unexpected. I faked being tired, told them my back was hurting, asked to take the pizza and the papers home. And in that moment I saw the relief wash over their faces, like they had already won. But inside I was more alert than ever. Every sentence spoken, every glance exchanged, every nervous twitch was burned into my memory. I knew a direct confrontation wouldn't work. They were too rehearsed. So I did what I'd learned from a lifetime running a restaurant. I observed in silence. I gathered every crumb they left behind. I read those documents carefully, researched the legal terms, consulted a lawyer friend. If they had a plan, now I had a counterplan. My strength didn't come from anger. It came from strategy. And in that silence they mistook for submission, I became dangerous. Dangerous because I knew. Because I had seen. Because I understood. And once you understand the truth, it sets you free. They had no idea that while they toasted to their premature victory, I had already decided to flip the script. Because every trap has a weak spot, and I was about to find theirs. Sometimes salvation comes from where you least expect it, and in the simplest form. When I reached into the pocket of my coat and found that little note, written in my grandson's childish handwriting, I felt a wave of emotion and relief. If you don't sign, they'll say you have dementia. It wasn't just a warning, it was a shield. A sign that I wasn't alone in this quiet battle. The innocence of a child had become my greatest weapon against betrayal. That fragile little scrap of paper shattered the carefully rehearsed act they'd planned. Because they didn't just want to take away my freedom. They wanted to silence me, discredit me, turn my voice into doubt. But with that note, the truth gained strength. It gave me the courage to question, to stand my ground, to resist. It made me realize that love, even in small forms, can be the greatest kind of protection. And right there, in that almost sacred moment, I understood I didn't have to fight alone. That the innocence and bravery of an 11-year-old boy might just be what saves us from the worst kind of betrayal. Because real strength, the kind that comes from love, can't be measured in signed documents. It lives in honest, fearless gestures. And that unexpected help reminded me that, despite the pain, I could still write my own ending. When I found out Jessica was already calling my friends, spreading lies about my mental health, I felt a mix of rage and sorrow. It's shocking how sometimes the hardest battles aren't the ones we see, but the ones fought in the shadows where false words become silent weapons. They weren't just after my signature. They wanted to erase my voice, destroy my reputation, isolate me. And that kind of pain cuts deeper than any open attack. It's a cruel game. Before you even get a chance to defend yourself, they're already crafting a narrative to discredit you. I thought of people who had gone through similar things. Families torn apart by gossip, careers ruined by lies, friendships ended by rumors. And that's when you understand, what's at stake isn't just a document, it's your dignity. And that kind of fight takes courage. And precision. But knowing they were plotting behind my back only fueled something inside me. I had to move fast. I couldn't let fear freeze me. I started collecting proof, confiding in trusted friends, protecting my peace. Because when the walls start closing in, that's when you gather your allies and strengthen your ground. And what came next would prove to me that even in the dark, truth finds a way. Once the suspicion was confirmed, I didn't hesitate. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, the one who knows my history and exactly how to protect my rights. Then I called my bank manager and asked them to flag all my accounts. It's amazing how, when you act fast, you can stop those who are trying to strip away your control. It's not about reacting, it's about anticipating. Reading through the documents calmly, I found something that chilled me to the bone. An emergency guardianship petition ready to be filed. They didn't just want my signature. They had a plan to declare me mentally unfit. A quiet way to steal my voice and my power to decide. It made me think of all the stories I've heard. People who lost their independence because they waited too long to act. In that moment, I understood that knowledge and immediate action are the best shields we have. More than anything, I realized that protecting your freedom is a daily fight. You can't blindly trust those around you, even if they're family. You need allies. You need awareness. And above all, You must never let anyone make decisions for you without knowing exactly what's at stake. The night still had more challenges in store, and I needed to be ready for all of them. When I decided to confront James on the phone, I knew it was time to take off the mask. I asked him directly about the guardianship request, waiting for an explanation or, at the very least, a moment of hesitation. But he gave me the classic excuse. I don't know what you're talking about. It was one of those moments where silence says more than words. Because behind that empty reply, I already knew there was something much darker being played. A cruel, calculated game, one that didn't leave me room to breathe. Soon after, I discovered that Jessica had already lined up a doctor willing to declare me mentally unfit. A bought professional ready to validate a lie. It was a twisted plan. A mix of deceit and power designed to erase me completely. They didn't just want my assets. They wanted to destroy my reputation, discredit my sanity, and do it quickly while I was still struggling to grasp the depth of their scheme. That revelation showed me just how far cruelty can go when fueled by greed. And the hardest part? Realizing they were so sure of their victory that they didn't even bother hiding it anymore. That feeling of being surrounded by enemies who wear familiar faces, plotting in the shadows, it's one of the deepest pains anyone can face. But in the middle of that storm, I uncovered a strength I didn't know I had. An untamed will to resist and prove that no one gets to decide who I am or what I deserve. And this battle was far from over. I'll never forget that phone call. Jessica's voice came cold, sharp. No longer wearing the mask of concern she used to hide behind. Sign it by Sunday, or we'll have you declared incompetent. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a sentence. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just facing greed. I was facing something far more terrifying. A calculated, merciless coldness willing to trample any value to get what it wanted. She had dropped the act. This was her true face. Cruel, manipulative, and void of empathy. What hurt me most was the emotional blackmail involving Liam, my beloved grandson. She said it clearly. If I resisted, he'd be taken away from me, forever. It was a direct attack on the thing I loved most, a weapon aimed at my heart. That's when you realize, some people will go to unthinkable lengths to get what they want, even if it means tearing a family apart. Her cruelty knew no bounds, and that only made me stronger in my decision not to surrender. It's strange how people's true nature only reveals itself when the situation tightens. And she wasn't hiding at all during that call. It was a test. Either I bowed down, or faced the storm she was ready to unleash. But what she didn't know was that behind that quiet, composed woman stood a force she could never measure. A force born of love, courage, and truth, things no piece of paper could ever erase. When my son James called me, there was something different in his voice. A mix of fear and guilt I didn't expect. He said he didn't know how far Jessica had gone, that she was threatening him with divorce and taking his son if he didn't play along. It broke my heart, because behind that weakness I saw a man trapped in a battle just as deep as mine. This wasn't just about power or money. It was an emotional survival war he didn't know how to win. Despite the pain, I saw a glimpse of hope in that call. His vulnerability showed me that he wasn't completely lost, that the line between right and wrong hadn't vanished entirely. And that gave me something to hold on to. The possibility that if I could reach him, maybe I could save not just him but especially Liam, our most precious bond. Because in the middle of all this, what truly matters is protecting the ties that still remain. That's where life challenges us. When we realize that even in the darkest shadows, there's a sliver of light. James was that sliver for me. A sign that, despite everything, reconciliation might still be possible. But that would take more than words. It would take courage. Courage to face the ghosts of the past and choose a different path. And I was still searching for that courage inside myself. The truth has a power nothing can silence. When the evidence began to surface, the masks fell. And with them, Jessica and James's entire scheme collapsed. Jessica, driven by her thirst for control and manipulation, had to face not only the family's rejection, but also the legal consequences of her twisted game. The woman who tried to destroy my life was exposed, and the image she built on lies crumbled like a house of cards. James, my son, had to look in the mirror and face the weight of his choices. The weakness he showed at the beginning turned into a harsh life lesson. He realized that giving in to blackmail had nearly cost him his relationship with his son, and shattered the last remnants of trust between us. It was a painful road, filled with regret, but one that opened the door to a possible new beginning, if he truly wanted to change. And for me, this battle wasn't just about beating a scheme. It was about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, and my story. Because behind the documents, behind the threats, stood a woman who refused to be erased. And the strength born from pain, from betrayal, and from love showed me that even when everything feels lost, we can rebuild. Life doesn't end on a dark night. It goes on, and sometimes it begins again.